All right, hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's program, Vesper Meadow Reconnecting People, Place, and Native Plants. My name is Brianna. I'm an adult services librarian with Jackson County Library Services. And before we start our program tonight, I'll run through a few housekeeping things. So first of all, this is a webinar format. So if you have any technical questions about Zoom during the course of the program, you can click on the Q&A button and send those to me, and I'll try to troubleshoot any problems you're having. So you will be muted and won't be able to see each other during the presentation. But if you do have any questions that you'd like the presenter to answer, please put those in the chat. And at the end of the program, we can go through all those questions. So this webinar will be recorded, and it'll be uploaded to our YouTube channel, JCLS Beyond. So the views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Jackson County Library Services. Today's program is part of Rogue Reads, a program designed to encourage everyone in the Rogue Valley to read and discuss the same books with the goal of promoting reading and building community through conversation. Rogue Reads is sponsored in part by Jackson County Library Foundation, by Coastal Media, Jefferson Public Radio, and Rosebud Media. One of the books that we picked for Rogue Reads this year was Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. We're very fortunate to have her join us for an author talk on February 23rd from 5 to 6:30. Last time I checked, there are 168 seats left, so please do sign up for that on our website. There will be a lot of probably similar conversations touching on some of the themes we discussed tonight too. With that said, I'd like to introduce our presenter tonight, Jeanine Moy. She's the founder and director of Vesper Meadow, and we're really excited to have her here tonight.
Thank you, Brianna. I'm gonna share my screen. It's really an honor to be here with y'all in the virtual space, but sharing this time with you, and thanks for joining. Our talk tonight, Reconnecting People, Place, and Native Plants, kind of will give us a tour of Vesper Meadow, of the work that is being done there, and we'll be telling you a story. So it intertwines an idea, the place we'll be introduced to, and the story as it's unfolding. And all along the way, some of the characters that will join us and that we'll meet are native plants that can be found at Vesper Meadow and throughout the bioregion, plants that have had a long-standing relationship with the native peoples of this place. I introduced these plants as a thing for us to learn about and to appreciate. I by in no way am encouraging people to harvest these plants, many of which have become rare on the landscape, and they are traditional foods of the people of this place. So getting into it, for those who are familiar with Vesper Meadow, I'm going to hold an announcement for the very end of the talk, keep you on the edge of your seats. We're going to start with a place, the Vesper Meadow Restoration Preserve. This is an upland wet meadow that is surrounded by mixed conifer forests in the Cascade Hills adjacent to the Siskiyou Mountains. You can see Mount McLaughlin standing above it in the back, very majestic. And if you live in Southern Oregon, you may be familiar with the spot. If you drive along the road known to some as Indian Memorial Road, you drive right through it. It's one of the first meadows that you hit as you go east from Ashland up onto the plateau. And this road, Indian Memorial Road, was previously a wagon road. And during the long Indigenous period, it was a walking trail up into the hills. And for those of you familiar with the area and the Cascade Siskiyou National Monument, this area is renowned for its biodiversity, and the monument here was designated specifically for that. I think it's important to recognize our connectivity with that conservation land, both adjacent and within the monument, because we know through the research of many scientists locally that these interconnected lands serve wildlife for migration. especially during a time of climate change where the landscape is changing and they may need to adjust geographically on the landscape. So just a little bit about the place for now. We're going to enter a story, and I want to start with acknowledging the people of this land. We have a creek on Looker's left here that was previously known as Dead Indian Creek. It has now come to be called Gallo Creek, named after the people who kind of would seasonally walk up from what is now the Medford foothills and tend this land, having a very intimate relationship with all of the many types of plants and animals that live here, interacting and trading and tending the land amongst other tribes that inhabited the area, the Takilma, the Shasta, the Klamath, Cow Creek, kind of all at different times. And just in recognition that all lands throughout the United States are someone's ancestral lands, that these lands were stolen in the late 1850s, that people actually, during this month in February or almost this month, next month, were forcibly removed and marched off to what is now the Siletz and Grand Ronde reservations. And these people continue to have a very historic and spiritual connection with these lands, continue to work to restore them, and at the same time revive cultural traditions, two things that are very intertwined. And in many ways, we can see that the land restoration is synonymous with cultural revival. So it's our honor to be on this land, and it is our duty to be a bridge with these people that call it their ancestral home. And so in that same spirit, I introduce you to camas. Maybe you've known it before. It grows throughout the West. This is a type of lily, and like all lilies, they have a very starchy, nutrient-rich bulb. It has long time been a very important food plant for Native peoples, second in caloric value after acorns in terms of plant foods. And in kind of the region that we're in, it's estimated that anyone who had access to this plant ate maybe 10,000 bulbs a year. And this kind of is testament to how actively people were tending this plant, to the native gardens, the indigenous gardens that they would visit seasonally. Women would camp out for weeks and dig the camas, separate bulbs, burn, reseed, sing songs, have many other practices associated with this plant. And in many ways, it is a plant that evolved with human cultivation of it. And so one of the earliest anecdotes we have about Vesper Meadow is from a Lagala elder, Molly Orton, who in the 1930s interviewed with Harrington and is quoted with saying that near the headwaters of Dead Indian Creek, now Lagala Creek, that there's a favorite camas digging meadow called Timph. And I think that it's very likely that this meadow and or meadows nearby are that place. There is ample evidence that presents itself on the land that this has long time been an important food place for people. Local archaeologist Justin Rohde documented this point dating back to maybe 3,000 years ago. And of course, people really having been on this land since time immemorial. One of the many creatures amongst some other pretty charismatic megafauna still seen today. And you know, these are animals that really thrive with the meadow ecosystem, whether they're hunting or seeking refuge along its edges, whether they're laying eggs or raising their young amongst the grass. Maybe they're eating the tender shoots along the creek in the spring. The meadow really is like a nursery and kind of harbors a lot of life. And so as the story unfolds, people were largely removed from these lands, and kind of animals have, as they have been throughout the West, really these meadows have been dominated by a single animal, the domestic cow. And herein is kind of a lot of associated management issues, not just kind of the trampling from their feet, but impacts to the meadow associated with the way that they were managed, with grasses that were brought in, pasture grasses that are non-native, that you can see here on the right, are very dominant throughout the meadow and prevent other plants from growing. They have a habit of growing really thick in the roots, holding in the soil until the bank is undercut so much that big chunks will fall in every spring. Here's one of the earliest photos we could dig up, and taken from an aircraft. You can see already a road, dirt road at the time, going through the meadow, effectively blocking the water flow in the meadow, not being able to flow like a sheet or be kind of being interrupted. Surrounding hillsides having various impacts of logging. You can see a more native stand on the north, pretty heavily logged hillsides on the east and west. Just a few years later, in 1960, like many places throughout the Rogue River Basin, there were many diversions and reservoirs created that impacted the landscape. And just a few years later, in 1966, it's increasingly more dry, visibly more dry. You can see large swaths of the meadow have been mowed for hay, continued logging. I will point out, you can see the creek drainage here. There's kind of a trail of willow and other riparian plants that exist in there. Here's a close-up, 2019, of two major impacts in the meadow, both the road, now paved over, and the diversion structure, where water is drawn out of the creek every winter through May in this canal to feed Howard Prairie Reservoir, and then down into the Talent irrigation ditch that provides irrigation down in the Rogue Valley. Now, this diversion structure was built so deep into the floodplain that everything above it, everything upstream, is continually eroding each spring and being head cut. And the creek essentially is digging itself deeper into the meadow. On top of that, you can see here this naked creek. It's missing all of its riparian plants. And so without willow and alder and plants that are in there that would otherwise stabilize its banks, it kind of continues to entrench itself. And this is almost growing like a cancer upstream, up the meadow. You can see in the foreground, it's very deep, and that kind of continues upstream, up into the tributaries beyond that. You might note some other impacts. There's places where cows have trampled pretty hard along old fence lines, north-south kind of canals that have been dug in various iterations of water diversion. And so again, this photo is 2019, just a few years ago. And then I had the good fortune of coming to this land together with Corey Ross on the left and her partner, Greg Conway, on the right. Corey was in a class that I was teaching, and it was called Stewardship of the Clan of Siskiyou. Everyone was thinking about ways to take care of their local bioregion, to contribute to the land. And Corey saw this property. It had been for sale for 10 years. It caught her eye. She approached me and we started talking. Could this be a research facility? Is this place ecologically significant? Is it somewhere where there could be an education center? And so we started talking and meeting twice a week, and it's so I'm very grateful to the both of them for having this vision and for making this happen, for the depths of their heart and their generosity. I can't think of too many other people that have as big hearts as they do, or work as hard as they do. So we came to the land and hit the ground running, started exploring and making maps to better understand it, started digging through every archive we could find to learn about historical anecdotes, working on infrastructure on site, tearing down old fences, cleaning up a ton of garbage, all this stuff you probably don't want to hear. And the thing I do want to tell you more about is how we got to know the neighborhood, how we invited every ologist that we could think of locally to come and make plant lists, to make fungi lists, to identify birds and bees and mammals and reptiles, to find whatever we could find. And reaching out to folks, it was an easy ask. You know, people had seen us from the road. Oh yeah, I know that meadow with the aspen. Oh yeah, I go and see sandhill cranes there. And so people, you know, had already naturally gravitated to this beautiful place. We now have a plant list over 260 plants, over 105 bird species, dozens and dozens of mammals and reptiles, approaching 70 butterfly species. I could go on and on. But a couple that I want to highlight, actually kind of the first immediate survey was right at the tail end of the Mardon skipper flight period. Called up John Villela, one of my board members, and I knew he was at the end of his annual Mardon skipper hunt with his daughter Ati and Diane Keller there on the bottom. And they're monitoring for the Mardon skipper because it is extremely imperiled. They are associated with wet meadows. They rely on native grasses to lay their eggs. They are so sensitive in part because they lay one egg per clump of grass. They rely on certain native plants to nectar on. They're only out for about a few weeks in the summer, and being named skippers after the fact that they don't move too far. They only kind of skip across a small area at a time in the summer. And so in fact, Vesper Meadow is home to the Mardon skipper. I should mention the Mardon skipper and the Oregon Vesper sparrow that we have here are both candidate species. They're both waiting to be protected under the Endangered Species Act. Meanwhile, here, the Oregon Vesper sparrow is estimated to be down to 2,000 to 3,000 individuals, one of the most imperiled birds in North America. And it was Karen Hussey, a friend that had worked at the Klamath Bird Observatory, who told me the first thing I found out about the meadow. There's Vesper sparrows there. I've surveyed them. And, you know, they are, again, really reliant on the meadow, just like the Mardon skipper. They lay their eggs and they nest in the grass. They spend most of their time pretty much within 5 feet of the ground and migrate south. We don't know exactly where the birds at Vesper Meadow go in the winter, but we're trying to figure that out. And so all these things are kind of falling into place, and we're learning about the neighborhood, and an idea starts to come together. And I introduced this quote that kind of introducing Robin, who's coming next month to talk to you all, that really, I think, beautifully captures the idea that we are putting into action, that humans are inextricably linked to nature, that we are reliant on it, and that we can have a positive impact on it if we are being conscious and learning about our actions and how they're impacting nature, and that it's a road that we're going down together, that we're not separate. And to highlight this rare species in the meadow, we named the place and an education program after the Vesper sparrow. And in the spirit of Kimmerer's quote, our logo is a camas lily growing from the ground, also being lifted from the earth by human hand in this kind of reciprocal nature. Our mission, the Vesper Meadow Education Program's mission, is to inspire a culture of land stewardship and nature connection, very broadly. And the framework for this work is that we are doing biocultural restoration, that we are both contributing to the health of the ecosystem and the biotic, the living components, while also bringing in the human and the cultural elements, the things that bind us to the land. And so increasingly, we are doing this through tribal partnership and identifying and supporting goals of tribal members, and then engaging diverse people and partners in the restoration on the land, the monitoring of that restoration with science and engaging people in that scientific process, telling that story of what we're doing through art and with the help of artists, and through educational materials, even some products created on site. And a big shout out to our parent organization, the Understory 501c3. This is a fantastic group of folks that started an organization less than 3 years ago. And they are meeting the need for a growing number of restoration projects that need seed, and really bringing restoration full circle by kind of literally from the ground up, providing grasses and flowers that are essential to the whole ecosystem. They bring together diverse networks of partners in kind of working collaboratives, federal agencies, tribal folks, restoration practitioners, seed growers, and they oversee the implementation of restoration projects and conduct monitoring to make sure that it's being done well. So fantastic group of folks, and I feel honored to work with them. I introduced Willow here, and what I always tell students is that sticks of willow are literally magic sticks. And it's kind of where the story starts. The story of restoration all starts with the water. It's our main focus. Water is, of course, the source of all life. And with the help of volunteers, in 2018, we did our first planting, working with just stakes of willow cut on site from various downstream places, and planting them to further kind of replace the willow that has been removed. And it's a great joy now, 3 years later, to kind of see the difference, and the willow's rooting in the creek. It's providing a medicine to the creek in the similar way willow provides medicine for people. It's a relief for pain, and it's where aspirin has been derived from. And I think of this kind of similarly in the creek. It's growing there now. It's readily taking and capturing sediment that continues to erode, as well as providing life for birds that live nesting there, cover for elk. It's you can really see it coming back, and it's kind of part of this larger framework of restoration where we're mimicking beavers. You can see some of the willow stakes early in the spring before it's leafed out, kind of holding back some sediment and some debris, kind of building up that creek bottom. As well as on the top of banks, small conifers. Volunteers are dragging these conifers down to stage them by the creek for the eventual creation of what we're calling post-assisted structures, or PALs. And these PALs, you can see a diagram here in the center, mimic beaver lodges, beaver dams. They capture sediment. They're still permeable and will allow fish to swim through. We have small fish at the meadow. And you can see our plan, part of our plan here on the left, where some of the structures are in the center of the creek, some are on the side bank, and they are going to capture some sediment, but also help bounce the water around bank to bank during high flow and recruit sediment that will then be captured in some of these channels spanning, like the top two post-assisted structures. So this is a model here of high flow in the meadow, kind of that flooding we hope to see in the spring. The inundation of the wet meadow hopefully will happen again and allow for wetland plants to thrive, wetland birds to thrive, really kind of jump-starting some of nature's processes. And this kind of is all laid out in a framework that's increasingly popular in restoration ecology right now, the low-tech process-based restoration. And we're so grateful to the Fish and Wildlife for helping fund this, and to the Beaver Coalition for helping make this happen. And the big hope really is to encourage beavers to come back. If this isn't, I think this picture speaks volumes. It's from the bootleg fire that happened earlier this summer, and just to the east of Vesper Meadow in the Klamath Basin. Here we have an oasis of life that will regenerate kind of surrounding forest lands, because beaver have been maintaining this creek. You know, beaver are the keepers of the creeks, and they really have an indispensable role. While we do this work, we're also engaging in scientific monitoring. So with the support of OWEB, we're starting this year with the Understory Initiative folks to monitor both the water, the flow, and the temperature, and the kind of height of the water at different times of year, as well as the plants that grow in the riparian area, the diversity of plants that grow there, and special plants like camas that are important as a first food for tribal folks. We continue working with the Klamath Bird Observatory doing wildlife monitoring. They did a baseline study a few years ago looking at the diversity of birds. This is a community assessment that when you see the different kind of distributions of birds in an area, it gives you an idea about the health of the ecosystem. So we're excited for them to recreate that in, say, another 5 years and see what changes. We work with volunteers that have some birding background and have been helping kind of identify birds, especially the Vesper sparrow. The Klamath Bird Observatory has allowed us to become the first place in Oregon with a MODIS station. You can see these radio towers, it's radio technology on the top right here, that are allowing us to now, this first summer, 2021, we were able to detect fledgling movement throughout the meadow and see how they're using the different places in the meadow as habitat. Come next spring, we'll see how many make it. And it's really, you know, this technology that's going to allow us to identify where in their life cycle they are seeing the most challenges and where they are surviving, and kind of get the full picture of their well-being. We continue to cross over the science with art. You can see this beautiful drawing of the Vesper sparrow below, and integrating it into our education programming. With the pandemic, we've been putting out a little bit of video material, so you can show some students Vesper sparrow videos. And here we transition into a beautiful yellow flower in the sunflower family called mule's ear. It grows in profusion in places that are wet in the meadow, kind of early mid-June, and it has really nutrient-rich, oily seeds that feed many birds and rodents. While it's in bloom, it feeds many, many bees and many butterfly species, for which the Cascade Siskiyou is renowned for its butterfly diversity. And you can see here a Mardon skipper nectaring on it. This is actually a pregnant female that we found 2 years ago. And we've just recently been kind of galvanizing some local partners to take action on protecting their habitat, not only at Vesper Meadow, but neighboring meadows. So working with some good folks at the BLM, the Beaver Coalition, the Understory Initiative, we're identifying threats on public lands, such as roads through wetlands, grazing allotments, and free roaming cows that might trample or eat their nectar sources, as well as developing a Mardon seed mix. And I had to throw that in because have you ever seen a cuter insect in your life? And so back at the meadow, you know, we've been engaging in this like slow process-based restoration again. Every year we've been collecting seeds with volunteers. This is a really fun and I think interesting way to connect with nature and sourcing seeds locally. We have Tula here on the right with a big bag of June grass seed. These are all going towards restoration on site. So local seeds being kept on site to create pollinator restaurants. I have no illusion of replacing all the grass that's non-native in the meadow, but by at least focusing on some places that are very dominantly non-native grass that serve no pollinators, we're killing it off with silage tarps. This is an agricultural practice we're borrowing, as well as some burning of the thatch to prepare these areas that will then soon become like an oasis. And you know, as soon as you plant some native flowers, the bees and the butterflies, they come right in. So applying those seeds that volunteers have collected, we hope to create stands of both nectar plants, of flowers such as the sea blush. It happens to be a Mardon, another Mardon nectaring plant, as well as native grasses. You can see the green base of these bunch grasses here on the right, very resilient to fire, good nesting habitat for Vesper sparrows, a place where Mardon skippers or other butterflies may lay their eggs. And again, with the community component, we've been working as part of a collaborative to monitor butterflies. And this is something that happens every other week in the summer, both at Vesper Meadow and adjacent conservation lands. We've been holding an annual bumblebee blitz and kind of doing mentorship with each other to learn about the bumblebees and at the same time document what we find year to year. And another good pollinator plant that kind of extends the season of nectar resources is Yampa. Yampa is out in late August when not a ton of other plants are. And it's in the carrot family. You might recognize its kind of umbel or umbrella-like arrangement. It has very aromatic seeds that you can see on the left. And a very dense and again, underground, kind of starchy, nutritious portion, kind of these tubers on the bottom. And this plant was formative for me when I connected with Kathy Kenta Robinson. She's here in the blue shirt on the left, now one of my board members, who is a very busy, active member of the SLETS tribe. We met while cleaning some camas seed with the Understory Initiative's seed clipper, and she suggested that she could bring down her youth group, Healthy Traditions, to Vesper Meadow, and I said that would be awesome. It just so happened to be when Yampa was in bloom, and they had requested for Grandma Aggie, their elder, to join at the time, and it was just a very meaningful connection. All the students looking back recognized and remarked about how that was one of the best parts of their trip. And one of the culminating things that sticks in my mind the most was the recognition of the Yampa next to us while Grandma Aggie was present, and Kathy leading students in the digging of the camas. And you see the cleaning and the sharing here. It was provided to Grandma Aggie and her daughter Nadine, and everyone kind of took a taste. And it was this moment where everyone was sharing this food that was family food, and really eating it for the first time. And it's these deep, deep connections that I think cannot just be recreated. Anyone can love the land, but this connection that goes back millennia, I think is really where I want to reorient my work personally. And I think it's a critical role that conservation land managers can play in bridging this gap between the land and the people of ancestry there. And so this work continues to grow and blossom. In 2020, before the pandemic, I had the good fortune of connecting with Dr. Brooke Colley at SOU, and she spearheaded a grant that was awarded by the Oregon Cultural Trust to facilitate the creation of the Indigenous Gardens Network. And this network is being led by the Confederated Tribes of Siletz and Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. And so we've been having monthly meetings to identify barriers and goals, and all kind of coming together around work to increase tribal member access to ancestral lands, to restore these lands in a way that supports the first foods that live at these places. And we are looking forward to the continuation of a first food management plan with both of these tribes kind of leading the way. The pandemic, of course, has allowed us a lot of time to talk and think about how to go about this, and just for a few kind of initial site visits. So we're still in very, very early phases of this project, but I think it stands to last a very long time and is really what will create a lot of good connections and create a lot of good changes on the land. So I believe this story is still developing, and it's going to be proliferated by the telling of the story. The ways that we do that, I think art is a excellent medium to do this. It's maybe a primary way, and it will kind of precipitate further education, inspiration to other land managers. And you know, the ultimate hope really is for this sort of work to be replicated on the landscape the world over. So here we come back to this plant that I see as extremely resilient and furthers the resilience of other beings. So it's very drought tolerant. Elderberry, or the black elderberry we have here, is widely known to be an immune boosting medicine. And I think that it's really kind of the framework we need to get into, get in our minds ASAP. And of course, a major part of our work is empowering youth and kind of providing that medicine to carry on into the future. You know, I think students today are hyper aware of how the world is and the challenges that we face. And really our work as older people is to give them the skills and keep them inspired to do work and to work with them. Circling back to this art piece, I believe artists are important thinkers and agents of change in society. They have a way of capturing information and putting it back out to a wide audience in a way that's inspiring. So we invite artists to come and paint and photograph and record and draw and whatever their dance, whatever their medium of choice is, and do that on the landscape, share it in classes. Here we have on the right a mural. Last year, Gabriel Barrera graced the place and reclaimed the barn, sharing kind of the messages of the species and the people that are on the land. And on the left here, I'm indebted to Sarah Burns, a local artist who, with Project Space, brings a lot of community together, has brought other artists out to the meadow, leads classes. And in this photo of her painting here, she is indulging in this idea to create a painter's point, similar to a photo point, to just document year after year the changes in her paintings. And we affectionately call this place Bovine Beach, but I think in a couple more years, the element of cows might hopefully won't be so evident. After 3 years of art creation at the Meadow, I'm really excited for this coming April. The Gamble Gallery in Ashland is going to host a multi-artist show of things that have been created at the Meadow over the last few years. So stay tuned for that. The other way we share kind of beyond the Meadow with what we're learning and to encourage people to engage in scientific monitoring are some tools to identify pollinators. And we have some other educational materials in the works, but here's our butterfly guide, our bumblebee guide. It's available at local retailers and on our website. And in looking ahead, I believe this is the last plant friend for the evening. We have fireweed here. And fireweed is another very resilient plant. You can see it grows from a rhizomes, from roots under the ground. It readily sprouts after fire and blooms in profusion, magenta kind of bloom across the blackened landscape. And, I think fire is something that people are becoming super keen to out of necessity and out of recognition of the cultural uses of fire that have been implemented on the land for thousands and thousands of years. And so we are continuing to explore ways to enhance forest health through research, through stewardship. We are examining fire scars. You can see a tree cookie from a tree that was cut in 1920. Almost 400-year-old tree, has a couple dozen fire scars on it. In the center, we're looking at downed wood that we're inoculating with local oyster mushroom spawn and exploring how the decomposition rates occur with that fungus. And of course, I think there's also a need for sharing this with our young people. And so a project that we're launching probably later this spring, maybe summer, will be a collaboration with the Siletz tribe. It's 4th through 10th grade curriculum about fire ecology and the cultural use of fire. And I'm really excited to have been working on it with Ryan Geyer, program coordinator, for over a year now. It includes maps and art and interactive kind of modules and videos to aid teachers to talk about fire in all different ways. So again, stay tuned for that. And all right, if you forgot, we have a big announcement. We're still growing in all of the ways as an organization in the projects we're working on. But if you're familiar with Vesper Meadow, the original Vesper Meadow, you might be excited to hear that we've gone from about 323 acres of upland wet meadow to close to 1,000 acres of 2 upland wet meadows, part of the interconnected watershed kind of in the area, surrounded by BLM managed monument, again, that conservation land. And here's a photo of that upper meadow. It's very much more intact. There's a lot more native plants there. It has been impacted by cows in the past, but not as much. So it's serving very much as a reference site. It's a place where we did some seed collecting to bring seeds down to the lower meadow this past summer. And it's very much a refuge for elk and sandhill cranes, likely the Vesper sparrow and Martin skipper. I'm excited for some surveys there this summer to check on that. And I think it's a very rich place for where tribal engagement and restoration of first foods will happen. And maybe kind of in opposition to that, you can see also on the right a parcel of land that we will begin working with soon. And we've kind of already started planning and thinking about the restoration of this clear cut here on the hillside. So getting into kind of a whole new arena with that. And, you know, there's a lot of good work happening all throughout Southern Oregon, and I really feel that we're stronger together. I just want to give a shout out, little logo smattering of our partners, people working in parallel, people supporting us, people kind of working in nowhere to make this work happen across the landscape. So I hope that tonight was inspiring for you. And I hope to see you at the meadow, maybe in the worm season. And I hope that you will join us and become part of the Vesper Meadow story. You're welcome to connect on the email list, check out the blog, contact me by email, stay in touch on social media, all of these things and more. So if you have any questions, I think Brianna maybe can help with some questions.
It looks like we got one. If you could tell us any more details about the expansion to 1,000 acres.
Well, it kind of happened this summer. The upper meadow, where the kind of other meadow I said that had more intact floral resources, we're currently working to get that also protected under a conservation easement with the Southern Oregon Land Conservancy, similar to the original Vesper Meadow. The clear cut is also adjacent to some other forested land that is kind of some fairly healthy second growth. So there's kind of a diversity now of different stages of forestry that I think will be interesting to showcase for folks to learn about past forest management practices. And you know, I'm just really happy to see kind of these interconnected lands being protected in this way, as opposed to being developed. You know, that's kind of how they are advertised. And I think it really points to a trend. You know, there's other land managers who have acquired properties that were previously managed for cows or kind of other extractive uses that are now going to conservation land managers. And so I think in some ways, you know, we're coming full circle. I'm going off on this big dream of mine at this point, telling you that, you know, conservation land managers, again, I think are a bridge with Native communities, or that they can be. And my ultimate hope is to continue developing these partnerships with tribes and to explore ways of engaging in land back and rematriation of these lands. And, you know, there's various models with land conservancies and tribal easements and kind of all sorts of things. So lots of ideas out there.
It looks like there's another question about if the map showed that the two meadows are connected to each other.
They are not they are not adjacent by property boundaries, but in between the two, it is Cascade Siskiyou National Monument. So effectively, in my mind, it's kind of the second best sort of conservation land that we could have in this area. And it, you know, it is connected by waterways. It's a tributary to Latgawa Creek that flows from the upper meadow down to the lower one. And for sure, animals use it as a corridor going between the two.
And we had another question. What is the common name of Yampa?
Yampa is the common name. Oh, well, sometimes it's called biscuit root, but its Latin name is Peritoridia, is the genus. So, and there's all types of Yampa and all types of biscuit root. So.
Okay, well, that looks, yeah, I got another comment in there about reaching out, making some more connections. That looks like the the questions that we've gotten in the chat so far. Any last little ones roll in. Thank you so much, Jeanine. That was like really cool to learn. I hadn't heard of Vesper Meadow before reaching out to you for this program, and it seems like you guys are doing a lot. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I think that'll wrap up our presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, I did see a chat. Someone had a question that they got in late and they were wondering if this is available to view again. Yes, this is recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel for the library, JCLS Beyond. So always reach out if you're wondering where to get that video and we can tell you where to find it. The library, or probably Jeanine could tell you too. All right. Well, thank you, Jeanine, and thanks everyone for attending, and hope you all have a good night.